Right. I think I would like to thank you very much, Chidi, for this interview. And I think today, just around early July, we're expecting a sort of a demonstration or maybe a gathering of the opposition party in Kenya dubbed as Sabasaba rallies. I think I would like to address that particular issue today. And I would like to state that the CORD party that has called for these particular rallies should be taken as the party that is responsible in case there is any damage that occurs. Protests and demonstrations are fundamental right of every Kenyan, whether old, whether young, whether rich, but that right must also be exercised with care and in consideration of other laws and rights. It must not affect especially the rights of other people and national economics. I've always taken part in protests and demonstrations around the world wherever I've been, whether in UK, in Canada, and other places. But you hardly hear in these particular countries of property being damaged. Life goes on as usual. Sometimes we meet our goals, sometimes we fail. The First Nations of Australia, for example, Canada, US, South America, and other places have been pushing for self-determination, sovereignty, land rights for centuries, but that has not been fully achieved. At the moment, they are using courts, they are using administrative machinery, they are using political machinery, they are using protests, they are using petitions, they are using the United Nations, the regional bodies like the Organization of American States. And let's be honest, the experience of these particular countries have been very painful, especially for the First Nations. We are talking of problems to do with the historical land injustices in these particular countries. Yet they have resolved to go the way of peace and non-destructive mechanisms. They have allowed the economies of their own countries to go uninterrupted, helping it expand and thereby use the economy to support their cause. In Kenya, unfortunately, protests and demonstrations are in most cases very violent. That's why embassies have been calling for CORD and the opposition stalwarts like Raila, Wetangula, and others to tone down. Because also you must also remember that there were warnings of similar nature that were given to the president of Ivory Coast. I have heard a few people talking about a Sabasaba revolution. I've read on the Facebook, I've read online where people are talking of kind of making a revolution as those that happened in Eastern Europe. This involves a lot of chaos. I've even received phone calls of people that are a little bit unsure on what to do. They are scared of their own lives. We have had families in towns like Naivasha where we have seen people boarding vehicles and fleeing to Western Kenya and other destinations. So I feel driven that I may need to mention a few facts. Those who have to those especially that have such violent thoughts. A revolution is not a one-time off or short-time affair. I think let us be honest with that. It can run for years. Once the flares starts and the problems begins, it is hard to control. It is hard to put off those kind of difficulties. Revolutions in most cases end up in civil wars. And that can take a long period of time. It can be very divisive. If not, it can fragment the society forever. It sweeps in its wake even those who started it, killing them, their families, and their loved ones too. Remember, although Mobutu was removed from power by Laurent Kabila, Kabila himself did not live long thereafter. The same sword that he used to deal with Mobutu the same sword cut his throat one day as he sat in his palace in Kinshasa. Since Mobutu's violent ouster and since 2003, 5.4 million Congolese people have been killed in a war that has destroyed not only lives, but natural resources and every development endeavor that was there. If Congo was a stable nation, it should be richer than countries like Australia. It should be richer than France. It should be richer than Netherlands. It should be richer than Italy. 90% of Congolese, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but 90% of Congolese would actually be owning mansions, cars, probably even aeroplanes. But that's not the case today. Today, over 4 million Congolese are refugees. 99% of them live in shacks and cannot afford even a decent meal. Death toll of other attempted revolutions are huge. We are talking of Russian revolutions, which claimed over 20 million between 1905 and 1940s. 30 years of European civil war ages ago claimed over 11 million. We are talking about the German Holocaust that claimed over 17 million lives. Nigeria, for example, had a similar problem during the Biafra War, which claimed 3 million, and still counts even up to this point in time with the rising again of Boko Haram. Sudan, which CORD cited recently, saying, ukiona jirani akinyolewa, prepare yourself, claimed over 4 million lives. In Korea, 4 million lie dead, Bangladesh 3 million dead, and very many others. Of course, we all remember about Rwanda. With 800,000 dead, we have the cases of Somalia, the cases of Uganda, the cases of Chad, Ghana, Syria, Eritrea, Iraq, and many other places where such revolutions were attempted. In addition to these death tolls, I think I need to mention everything else: economic life, social life, family life is all disrupted. Libya today lies in ruins. The National Transition Council leadership, which from my own analysis, CORD is borrowing heavily in the manner in which it operated, is no longer there. And warlords are fighting it out, whether in Benghazi, whether in Tripoli, and other places. The Central African Republic today currently is in turmoil, with the deaths and refugees mounting each day. So those talking about revolutions to change a government may as well, as far as I'm concerned, check these facts before acting. Kenya may be in fire everywhere, be they CORD or Jubilee regions, whether you are talking about Coast, Nyanza, Western, and other places. Millions of Nyanza people will obviously have to cross over to Tanzania and Uganda. Western Kenyans will have to flee to Uganda and Sudan through areas like Luakaga, Chebukube, Ndebez, Senda Kwanza, and other places. I'm not very sure where other people will flee to. Of course, in the Coast province, they may want to go through Lungalunga and flee Kenya and using other Panya routes. The eastern region and easterners may have nowhere to go because already in Somalia, the region is having more fierce fires than Kenya, as it were. So there are all these problems. The lawlessness that will ensue when there is disturbance of peace will wipe out our development, our factories, our farms, our supermarkets, kiosks and slums. I think we are talking of a very dangerous scenario. Marauding gangs, of course, will emerge. They will roam the countryside and towns with the destructive hand of brutal nature that will spare no one. Revenge forces may seek to avenge their anger on CORD leadership as well as also on other actors who may never survive the purge, even if they resort to arming their informal supporters. Many warlords, of course, will emerge. Imagine each of those leaders in various parties, whether CORD, Jubilee, Amani, and others, each becoming a warlord in his own home turf. Even if these leaders survive, the national anger and retaliations that will emerge the international long arm of law will catch up with them. The utterances that I have heard, whether in Parliament and outside Parliament, by our leaders, both in CORD and Jubilee, are in fact very sufficient to prosecute these individuals before the International Criminal Court. If you listen to what those statements said, some said we have more men around. Others said we are ready to give our own lives in defense of either CORD or Jubilee. Compare those words with the words that Gaddafi gave just before ICC caught up with him when the National Transition Council was organizing the rebellion. That speech by Gaddafi formed a key element of ICC evidence. He then preferred death than being taken into custody by ICC. Presidents Gaddafi, Gabo, Hissène Habré, and others tried to seek some refuge in their own strongholds where supporters are or fellow tribesmen. Our leaders, perhaps turned the new warlords, may decide to hide deep in their own regions, deep in Chulu Hills, for example. They may want to go to Abadeas or Mount Elgon Caves or Muhoroni, but they will be caught up one day. Muladiks, Karandiks, and others in Yugoslavia hid for 11 years among their Serbian tribesmen, but Hague eventually caught up with them. Once the UN Security Council passes a resolution, the entire CORD and Jubilee leadership will be on their way to the ICC. It may be a very bad and sober ending for some of our star and distinguished and valued politicians that we have so much admired, like Raila Orengo and others. Others that may be in the same flight-bound ICC chartered flight could include even Kalonzo if they go that violent route. People like Mudhama, people like Kamande, Kamau, and whatever they have said. As much as people have the right to protest, they have a right, they ought to do that in a more peaceful way. There are facts that are there. Once the international justice system begins, it will be very hard for it to be stopped. It is almost near impossible. The rule of law in these institutions apply. Every rule, every comma is always observed. And there is no way you can bring the cases back. That's how Slobodan Milosevic ended. And we remember very well, the African Union, the Nigerian government tried all it could to protect Charles Taylor, but it was unsuccessful. President Gabo today is languishing in jails in the ICC. His wife, Simone, is also rotting away somewhere in the home detention in Ivory Coast, as he is wanted also by the International Criminal Court. They refuse to listen to repeated requests from the United Nations Security Council and countries like France, US, to avoid a bloodbath route. CORD and Jubilee and anyone agitating for acts that may end up with violence must tread the path very carefully, for the end may be a very bitter pill under national laws, international laws, ICC laws, or even the law of the jungle, via marauding gangs that may appear who may take law in their own hands as power vacuum tussle ensues. As leaders, we must ensure calm and peace prevails when Sabasaba day comes. Protests, go and protest, yes, do your protest, but ensure your followers are calm, civil, and avoid any violence. Leaders must avoid utterances that have violent messages in them. Say, for example, if somebody says, utanyolewa bila wembe, watajua mimi ni mwanaume, and such kind of words, those are not the best words to use in public places. May I say this, that in the near future, in the 2017, I will be standing for the presidential position. I expect to be the best president Kenya has ever had, and we shall enact new laws on how to protest, on demonstrations. The law will guarantee the highest rights of agitation, or street protests, etc. But we will ensure these are peaceful at all times. Organizers of the protest will also be liable for any destruction of property or deaths. My government will provide security to those who will be marching wherever they want to go. Government will be obligated to respond to public demands within a very short period of time. When this fail, if the government fails to respond and act appropriately, people will have the liberty to flood the national capitals, urban areas, towns, and even in the rural areas to protest and demonstrate their anger against government decision. I intend to be your best president. I will establish the best rule that the world has witnessed. And I'm pretty sure that the rules that we shall put in place, the development we shall bring in place, will be a talk for centuries to come. Because we have to change our Kenya the way it is, whether in the areas of protest, whether in the areas of economic development or political advancement. Your future with me as your president is the best future that you can bet. Thank you.